My arm.
Hey, honey?
Oh, Beth. Hey, honey. Beth.
Can you hear me? My name's Dr. Arrington. You're in the
wasn't
hospital.
feeling well, and then this
You
morning...
had a seizure this morning, Beth. Have
Right.
you had something like that
She have a
before?
history of seizures?
No.
Let's
Jesus.
get some help.
Beth, Beth.
Sir, you have to go.
I'm sorry. Your wife is dead.
I mean, I just saw her. We were just at home.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and due to the overwhelming number of requests I've had, today we'll be exploring Steven Soderbergh's 2011 medical thriller Contagion. With most of the world now reeling in the rise of coronavirus cases, I must stress that this video isn't designed to alarm people, but to instead give us some perspective and insights on why it's so crucial for us to take this global pandemic seriously. Despite Hollywood's insistence that a single person is all it took to save the world, whether that person is Will Smith in I Am Legend or Brad Pitt in World War Z, Contagion functions as a reality check that conclusively demonstrates the combined efforts of everyone required to defeat a pandemic. Featuring a star-studded cast including Lawrence Fishburne, Kate Winslet, Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Marion Cotillard, Jude Law, and Bryan Cranston, the film chronicles the rapid global spread of a deadly airborne virus, the efforts of public health officials to keep it in check, and the societal unrest that results. Exploring the spread of MEV-1 through separate storylines and from the unique perspectives of different characters, Contagion effectively explores a variety of themes, including the scientific procedure for characterizing and containing a novel pathogen, the roles and responsibilities of public health physicians to quell outbreaks and mitigate panic, factors that could serve as vectors to spread disease, and the risk of social order collapsing in the face of an unprecedented existential threat. With the completion of Steven Soderbergh's 2009 biographical comedic crime drama The Informant, written by Scott Z. Burns, the two filmmakers began exploring Burns' fascination with the field of transmission. The seed that grew into Contagion is even featured in The Informant, in a scene where Matt Damon's psychologically unstable character Mark begins going on a rant about how he thought he was sick and how his kids were going to get ill.
Now what happens? Something you breathe in on an airplane. Some little bacteria, and now it's in his hands, the cup, the phone. Probably got it from his kids, and now I'll spend the weekend with it in bed.
After agreeing to cover the field of transmission, Burns suggested they tackle a medical thriller that did what only a handful of films like Outbreak and The Andromeda Strain have managed to do: create a narrative that follows a believable trajectory of a virus outbreak. Wanting to capture an authentic portrayal of a pandemic event, Burns contacted several health professionals to act as consultants during the production, from Lawrence Brilliant, the epidemiologist and former medical officer in the World Health Organization that participated in the 1980 eradication of smallpox, Dr. Ian Lipkin, the professor of epidemiology and director for infection and immunity at Columbia University, as well as investigative journalist Laurie Garrett, whose 1995 novel The Coming Plague, Newly Emerging Diseases in a World Out of Balance, informed many of the narrative plot points. While researching virology, the screenwriter paid as much attention to how society functioned during a pandemic as he did on the viruses that caused the global crises. His observations and discussions with medical professionals posited many urgent questions, like how an infectious disease can spread and what its internal mechanisms were, how a pandemic can put pressures on healthcare systems, the effects on the global economy, what the role of social media was in distributing information, and what measures might be taken by governments to flatten the curve. It's haunting to think that revelations from Burns' research, which informed the narrative, have now become our reality, with most countries, like my own, currently enforcing lockdown protocols, people being urged to work from home, hospitals around the world pushed to capacity, and the global economy taking a battering over the past month due to these uncertain times. While the MEV-1 virus featured in the film is a work of fiction, its characteristics were based on the deadly Nipah virus. This zoonotic neurological and respiratory disease essentially causes inflammation in the brain of infected hosts and has a terrifying fatality rate of 40 to 70%. Not only were its symptoms and the fatal complications caused by the virus copied for the film, but MEV-1's creation, with the interplay of bat and pig DNA, was also borrowed from Nipah's real-life origins. Although the structure and qualities of MEV-1 were modelled on the Nipah virus, the relatively small number of reported cases associated with the disease led Burns to use other virus outbreaks as inspiration for their fictional pandemic, most notably the notorious 1918 Spanish flu, which infected over 500 million people, and its H1N1 variants, which have resurfaced over the years, like the 2009 H1N1 pandemic.
The Centers for Disease Control says H1N1 has spread to 46 states. More than 1,000 Americans have died, and more than 20,000 have been hospitalized.
In the film, MEV-1 is so contagious that we see it spreading around the globe within days. To help explain how this was getting out of hand so quickly, Contagion repeatedly references scientific terms and processes, like the introduction of the basic reproductive number R0, which is a mathematical term that indicated how contagious an infectious disease was, and the breakdown of fomites, which were objects that could harbor pathogens and cause indirect transmission between people. By correctly defining the scientific concepts required to predict MEV-1's potential spread, Contagion paves the way for the audience to link these themes to the containment protocols introduced later in the film, from quarantine, which lowered the contact rate, to vaccine development, which helped the immune system prepare for future exposure to MEV-1. The film also places a significant emphasis on the fundamental approaches to reducing transmission via social distancing, self-isolation, and proper hand hygiene.
Get ready. Thanks.
Beginning with the introduction of Beth Emhoff, a businesswoman infected with MEV-1, returning to the US from a corporate trip in Hong Kong. We see the people she interacts with before trailing her return to her family home in Minneapolis, her unexpected collapse and eventual death, followed shortly by the tragic death of her son, which left her husband Mitch, later revealed to be immune to the virus, and his daughter Jory, broken by the dispassionate and sudden loss of half their family. The subsequent deaths of Beth's lover, and the rise in the number of others becoming infected across the globe, quickly send the Department of Homeland Security into a panic, with fears that the disease was a bioweapon, prompting the agency to consult Dr. Ellis Cheever of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Are you concerned that the CDC faces a credibility issue here, after the perceived overreaction to H1N1?
I'd rather the news story be that we overreacted and that many people lost their lives because we didn't do enough.
After putting the agency at ease, Ellis dispatches Dr. Mears, a bright epidemic intelligence service officer, to investigate the source of the outbreak. While the work of Dr. Mears was instrumental in discovering that Beth was the source of the spread in the United States, further research conducted by Dr. Leonora Orantes of the World Health Organization and her colleague Sun Feng ends up identifying Beth as patient zero of the entire pandemic. By seeing the interplay and dynamics at work between organizations, Contagion addresses the role of public health officials as experts in data analysis, risk communication, crisis mitigation, and knowledge transfer. There's also a great scene with Dr. Mears which demonstrates the political nature of their job, with the epidemiologists being forced to navigate through the economic and societal concerns of local officials. Contagion then quickly introduces us to a myriad of characters around the world dealing with the chaos caused by the outbreak, from families, friends, neighbors, reporters, social influencers, members of the government, all the way up to specialists in the medical community. In this way, we get to infiltrate the minds of every single citizen and see how they coped in response to the new strain on their lives. As MEV-1 quickly reaches an alarming number of countries, major cities begin enacting lockdown procedures to prevent the spread. The imposition of global quarantines and curfews, the eventual distribution of vaccines through national lotteries, as well as the use of barcoded wristbands to identify the immune and inoculated members of society, showcase the complex dichotomy between freedom and restrictions required to achieve order during a pandemic. By analysing the social repercussions of a medical crisis, Contagion deconstructs societal behaviour and how a rapid escalation in deaths, coupled with growing fears, in addition to the rise of misinformation, had the potential to disrupt social order. A great example of how misinformation could be detrimental to the fabric of society is given to us with the conspiracy theorist and blogger Alan Crumwide, whose insistence that the government had been lying to the public only served to exacerbate the crisis. Despite having a valid point about a lack of transparency from the government and administrative hypocrisy, with Dr. Cheever revealed to have notified his wife ahead of the public, Cheever's minor blunder pales in comparison to the actions of Crumwide, who deliberately sparks a panic by telling his millions of followers to ignore the advice of the government. Taking a far more nefarious turn, the blogger then goes on to advise his listeners to avoid the vaccine created at the film's conclusion, while selfishly pushing fake cures like Forsythia in return for millions from alternative medicine groups.
You're familiar with Forsythia?
What does Forsythia do?
It's the cure.
Contagion consistently portrays health experts and physicians as selfless people that cared about everyone's well-being, but it's also careful to portray its characters as people who had human failings. For example, Dr. Mears does an incredible job at helping reduce the spread of MEV-1 and also supervise the construction of temporary hospitals. But she also continues to work for some time while sick and puts others at risk despite showing signs that she too might have contracted the disease. Despite having been issued an order to destroy samples of MEV-1 contained within his labs and reduce the chance of spreading the virus further, Dr. Sussman continues his experiments and ends up identifying a usable cell culture using bat cells. This ends up being vital to the CDC, with Dr. Hextall using this information to determine that MEV-1 was a mixture of viruses composed of genetic material from both bat and pig DNA. Dr. Hextall herself violates protocols by testing a potential vaccine on herself to avoid the lengthy human trials that would take months and lead to the deaths of thousands. Another critical theme in Contagion is the role of social media platforms as a means for illuminating awareness about MEV-1, as well as for spreading sensational news. The former media consultant turned blogger, Cromwide, initially puts his online platform to good use, warning the public about MEV-1 before the public announcements that reiterated his message. But after seeing the financial potential of exploiting this trust, he starts intentionally giving harmful advice by telling his audience to reject the vaccine. News of Cheever's breach of public trust is also spread through social media on platforms like Facebook, resulting in global awareness of his wrongdoing and legal ramifications for his actions. The pervasiveness of online media and the receptiveness of people who consume it demonstrates the capacity for social media to generate action and behavioral changes, but it also highlights the dangers of unverified information being taken as gospel.
Only be able to give out 50 doses today. That's our Forsythia 11.
With the creation of Hextall's vaccine, countries around the world quickly begin mass production, but due to the overwhelming demand, the CDC begins awarding vaccinations by lottery based on people's birth dates. After having denied Jory the ability to meet up with her boyfriend for over 135 days, for fear of also losing her to MEV-1, Mitch recreates a prom night for Jory and his daughter's now vaccinated boyfriend. This hope-filled moment marks the beginning of a return to normality for the surviving characters. But before we have a chance to see more of how the world was beginning to heal, a final flashback reveals what caused the global pandemic. Ironically, we discover that Beth's construction company was cutting down trees in a forest that destabilized bats and forced their retreat to urban areas. One of these bats is seen eating fruit, which it drops in a pen. The fruit is then consumed by a pig, creating the unique hybrid novel virus. And finally, the infected pig is butchered and handled by a chef who shakes Beth's hand. I'm not gonna lie and say that Contagion isn't depressing, with the global death toll in the film surpassing 26 million before the introduction of the vaccine. Nor will I say that it's easy to watch, especially during these challenging times. But what I will say is that it helps give some perspective to the scale of the problem we all now face. The film is an entertaining and thought-provoking medical drama, but Contagion also feels like a movie-length public service announcement. From warning us to take social distancing and hand hygiene seriously during a pandemic, to highlighting our own personal responsibilities to help mitigate the spread of disease.
My wife makes me take off my clothes in the garage, and she leaves out a bucket of warm water and some soap. I mean, she's overreacting, right?
Not really. And stop touching your face, Dave.
Although the existential dread of our current crisis and the uncertainty we're experiencing can be overwhelming, I find it sobering to know that you and I have the power to hasten our return to normality. Well, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone who requested we explore Contagion. Don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification icon to stay up to date on all my content. And if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Lock the door.
Get back in your car. No, we don't want to go back there. We want to go across. Sir, there is no exit. We're not sick. Get back in your car or I will be dating you.